Okay, welcome back everyone. Welcome to 2019 and welcome to our brand new, really super basic series. Super basics of cells and evolution. So I thought I'd go back and really do the basics again so that they were clear for everyone and clear for me so that I knew everything that I would need to know in order to teach this stuff really clearly and I could explain it really clearly. And so here we are. So our first module, module 1, is going to be on evolution, and then we'll talk about the basic proteins, and then we'll go through a little bit of biochemistry, structure of the cell, genetics in a very basic sense, amino acids. We're just going to get really basic miasma of biology. And that's really exciting. I'm actually really pumped for that because there's a whole lot of stuff that you kind of think you know, but then, you know, when you get asked about it, maybe you don't, like the structure of an amino acid, for example. So, module 1 is going to be evolution. The other thing I'm going to try with these is just keeping them real short and punchy. So, we're aiming for like 5-minute videos. So, I need to get my eraser, which happens to be a sock. So, evolution. Somehow a particularly contentious topic, mainly because it's associated with people's beliefs. So, what's the basic concept of evolution? I hope you can read that. That's better. So, what's the basic concept of evolution? Well, environmental change leads to selection pressure leads to conformational change or change in the species. And that's kind of the first really basic concept of evolution. Now we can go through kind of the history of evolution and how it came to be and really kind of ancient Greek theories of where all the species came from. But kind of the basic assumptions of taxonomy, and taxonomy is the... So we'll do taxonomy. Taxonomy is the study of living things and trying to categorize them into evolutionary pathways and species, etc. So, right. And so we can go through kind of the history of evolutionary study, but the long and the short of it is it started out with everyone assuming that really all the species were stagnant, they were the same, they were consistent over time, they didn't change at all over time. And then kind of there was a little bit of, I'm trying to stay in frame, and then kind of there was Charles Darwin, who went around the world and studied finches, and he noticed that all of these finch birds, we're going to try and draw a bird, these finches with their wings and whatnot kind of all looked the same, right? But they had different beaks. They had different beaks because they were evolved in different locations. And so the theory came about from Mr. Darwin that indeed species come from a common ancestor, but in fact they evolve, is exactly the word, they evolve into different species. And that is the entire theory of evolution. So let's talk about evolution and how it matters for our daily lives with a couple of little examples. So one of the other things, so we got evolutionary, selective pressure, and we got the finches and how that theory came about, and we used to have the theory that all species were the same throughout time. Let's talk about the scale of time if you want. So like if this is time and this is the start of life, and this is now, up until about here is just bacteria. Just bacteria for half of all the time of life. And then we get up to like here and we get the dinosaurs, which we would think of as a super long time ago, but it's not. And then the dinosaurs die out. And then we go like way up, really just the width of this line way over here is all the species. All the species we know came about in that little one line, right? Which is pretty crazy, I think. It's just like this tiny little segment of time is when we actually got all the species that we see today. And the assumption that species are stagnant and non-changing is kind of ludicrous in that context. So that's really cool. Now let's talk about evolution in a more real life perspective. And of course, the example that everyone gets is drug-resistant bacteria. Right, drug-resistant bacteria. And so how did drug-resistant bacteria come about? And it's a big problem in hospitals, and it's becoming even more of an issue because of misuse of antibacterial and antibiotics and antibacterials to deal with this problem, and we are actually training the bacteria to survive all of the attacks that we have against them. So what happens? So you have a population of bacteria, right? And some of you may have seen that video of like they have a big table of what looks like agar, and they kind of started at one end, and with incremental levels of antibacterial antibiotic, the different strains of the bacteria which evolve manage to get through that antibiotic all the way to like 1,000 times or 10,000 times or 100,000 times concentration antibiotic, which is really crazy. Anyway, so you have your agar dish, or your human being, or your cattle in a cow yard and a feedlot, and into that culture you give it antibiotic, and then a lot of them die, but some don't die. And the some that don't die have developed a gene, or they have a gene, because of genetic variants, they have a gene within their genome that is resistant to the antibiotic that you're giving them, right? Now these guys, resistant. So how does that work? Well, through mutation and through speciation, through general diversity in the bacterial population, remember there are a hell of a lot of these guys, through variation in the genome before the selection event, there's the possibility for some of them to survive the selection event. And then some of them do survive the selection event because of randomly selected mutations or random mutations in the genome, and then they go on to survive in this new context. And that's, now they have an evolutionary advantage, they have a selectionary advantage, so the change going in here, having the antibiotic, is what I said before, the change in environment and a selectionary pressure leading to evolution, right? And so the next step is we're here with antibiotics and we have heaps of bacteria, because all the descendants from this guy are the ones that proliferate to make up the next generation. And that's pretty cool.